This is Jim Baldonado with the Home Agency, and with me today is Derek Williams from Plum Creek Applications. And Derek, I know what you do, but would you just give us a little background and give us a little bit about what you're up to?
So I started Plum Creek Applications back in 2015. What we kind of do is work for a bunch of farmers, producers, I guess in the central Nebraska area. We're kind of the middle person between a feedlot and a farmer, handle logistics for dealing with fertilizer or manure in a lot of instances, and dealing with the logistics of getting that product from the feedlot to a farmer and across his field, and dealing with all the numbers that have to go with it and what kind of the best options are for a farmer to cut out commercial fertilizer and save $1 for him at the end of the day.
I see. Then, and it's not always manure, but most of the time it is. But are there other materials that you are spreading on their fields?
So majority of it is manure. We have done a little bit of compost, chicken litter, ag lime, and also some biosolids from some of the waste treatment facilities on some of these larger towns.
I see. So tell us a little bit about that. That interests me about from these towns.
So every town has, I guess, an NPDES permit as well. So all of the waste, I guess, that kind of goes down your toilet at the end of the day, that is fertilizer, or some of these larger towns that might have a packing plant. There's products that go into those pits for recycling that water, but there's also solids that go into those pits, and they use dredgers or other means on getting these products out. And what they're called is biosolids. After that, you take the solids out of the water, dry down, and then there's a nutrient value to those biosolids, to the point where there's actually interest with farmers on, I guess, acquiring those products and spreading on their fields too, and act as a fertilizer.
Interesting. Interesting. Back to, the farmer, the manure, the feedlots. A majority of the manure does basically comes from feedlots.
Feedlots or confinement facilities. There's a lot of, I guess we'll call it protein. You get confinement with chicken, hogs, and cattle here in Nebraska. And a lot of feed goes to those animals, and a lot of the byproducts would be the manure or the fertilizer in a lot of these cases, are part of these NPDES permits to keep our water clean and our areas clean, and handling those products and getting them back to the fields to recycle them and offset a lot of these high-priced fertilizer costs is kind of what there's so much interest in it with Nebraska, because there's a lot more confinement. We have the water, we have the corn, and we have the space.
Sure. Now, there's a lot more in manure than people think. I mean, there's a lot of different things. We were talking about some of them on our way down. You concentrate on 5 different.
Yep, I concentrate on, I guess it'd be 5 nutrients. So you got your big 3, you got your nitrogen, your phosphorus, and your potassium. And I go a little bit further and start to concentrate on the sulfur and the zinc. Those are kind of your core nutrients. Any farmer, if you're going to go corn, soybeans, alfalfa, any other, I guess, crops that a farmer might be looking at, but those are kind of your 5 core nutrients that a farmer is going to be working with. And what I do is I kind of take those nutrients on a manure sample and work it back against, say, like your 32% or your 4600, which would be your nitrogen, your 1152O, which would be your phosphorus, or your potash, which would be your potassium, or say like a thiazole product, or a 36% or 32% zinc product, and get that cost per pound for each of those nutrients and come up with a value for what that manure would be. And say a farmer has a legal or a field that he wants to look at, I'll look at that field, figure out the logistics of, say, taking a manure product from a feedlot and figure out what it would cost for payloaders, the trucking, get that product to the field, and then also get the cost of what that product would cost to get it spread across the field. And I come up with a ratio. So if you take your total operation cost divided by the total nutrient value of those 5 nutrients, and you come up with a ratio. And for most farmers, if we can get that around 0.5, what that tells us is you're getting your fertilizer at 50% of what it would be at commercial fertilizer costs. And what it does is you go up to, say, like a 1, that's telling you you're 1-to-1. In other words, you'd be a wash on whether or not you go with commercial fertilizer cost, or you try to get that manure spread on your field. And that's kind of where that takes the math and puts it into making a good decision for that farmer or passing on it and going with a commercial fertilizer for that farmer.
Well, and when you're using manure, you're not spreading that on the same field every year. Is that correct?
So a lot of these fields, most good farmers wouldn't be doing that, but some fields, if you're doing a light enough rate, you can. Or if you have a nutrient management plan for some of these feedlots, they might do that every year just so they have a spot to take that manure to that is working in their system on their confined feeding operation. But right now, with as high as fertilizer costs are, if you can spread that field and go from field to field and supplement with just nitrogen, say you do a 20-ton rate of a manure product that you might have 20 pounds of phosphorus per ton, you're going to be giving a 400-pound shot of nitrogen or phosphorus to that field. And if you're growing 225 bushel corn, you're only going to be taking off 72, 73 pounds of phosphorus each year. So you're going to have 4 or 5 years worth of phosphorus on that field. So it wouldn't make sense to apply manure on that field that same next year. It'd be best off to wait 4 years, supplement with nitrogen, and save money versus applying manure on that same field every year.
So the cost of doing the manure may look a little bit more expensive in the first year, but in the long run, it really isn't. It's a huge cost savings.
So a lot of farmers, they get it in their mindset that it's a really expensive option compared to commercial fertilizer, and it is, but it all comes down to how much product you're putting on that field per time. So if you're doing let's say a 20-ton rate again, and if it's going to cost us, let's say, just shoot for $10 a ton total operation for the trucking and the spreading to get it done. So you're looking at a $200 an acre investment to get that job done. And if you tried to get just 1 year's worth of phosphorus and other nutrients, nitrogen for that year, you might be looking at, say, $100 or $150 to get it done that 1 year. Yes, it is more expensive that 1 year, but it's years 2, 3, and 4. You're only going to have to put nitrogen out there, and it may only cost you, say, that $100 if today's prices where it's $1 a pound of nitrogen. You'd be saving where you're not going to have to put that phosphorus out there and your sulfur, your potassium, and your zinc and have that investment. You might have a total operation cost of, say, $20,000, but that nutrient value on that manure that went out there might be closer to $80,000 or $100,000.
Sure.
So then you start looking at the difference in that, and that's $60,000, $80,000 in your pocket versus paying to the fertilizer companies.
So when a producer wants to apply manure, where does he get that from, or where do you get it from?
So there's quite a few different facilities that I guess I work with or source manure. Kind of my business model is I try to get the communication going between the farmer and the feedlot. There's some farmers that have me communicate to a feedlot or a confined feeding operation for them. But, some facilities might have a cost that they are associated with that product before they let it go out the door. But at the end of the day, I'm working for the farmer, so there's quite a few different facilities that I work with to source manure for them. And what I do is I figure out the logistics to each one, and I report back to the farmer on what field he's looking at wanting to do, and I present them with what the best option is for them with what's available at those times.
I see. So, and I know we talked about this. Do certain crops benefit more from manure?
So take like a legume crop, say like a soybean. It would probably not benefit as much. I guess it would still benefit, but I guess the right word to use is probably your opportunity cost. With applying the product and then going to a soybean crop, there's going to be nitrogen in that product that you're spreading on your field. That soybean crop, it'll still utilize it, but it doesn't need to utilize that where it's going to be nitrogen fixing itself. So let's say you got 10 pounds of nitrogen per ton and 50% of it's available the first year. And again, you're doing a 20-ton rate, you're going to have a 50-pound nitrogen credit out there that you wouldn't have to put out there on that crop. And if you're going to soybeans, 50 pounds of nitrogen at, again, today's market prices, that's $1, a little north of $1 a pound, or more than $1 a pound. So you're talking $50, $60, $70 an acre, the opportunity cost of switching to those soybeans that you could have put towards your spreading cost, trucking cost if you would have gone to corn.
So the longevity of manure could be in that 4-year range, especially if you put soybeans in there. For 1 year?
And with your rotations with it, soybeans use a little bit more phosphorus than what your corn will. But yeah, if you start looking at, and even if we get better testing manure that we apply after the whole job, I've seen some places that we get 10 years worth of phosphorus out there in one application. If we get
Really?
some of that product tested in the 40 pounds per ton as applied, and it all kind of tends to be, higher yielding crops are going to remove more nutrients from the field, and lesser yielding crops don't remove as much. So that number is kind of a moving target based on the productivity of the field and how much the nutrients were actually in the product and the rate that we did.
I see. Is there a big process on prepping the field to get spread?
So with the equipment and the business that I run, we've got high flotation tires, big four-wheel drive tractors, and flotation tires on the spreaders too. But also have vertical beaters and 500 horse tractors, and we kind of set up the operation as a no-till operation because that's what my family's farm is. And the reason we did that is so that way there's minimal footprint when we're out there, but also so that way the farmer can farm through it as soon as it's applied. He doesn't need to disc up the whole field. He can maybe work up some of the high traffic areas to get out of some of the compaction where the stockpile was, or the field entrances where there was a lot more footprint from the equipment being out there. But for the most part, it'll be a minimal footprint with what we're spreading out there, so that way farmer can just farm right through it.
I know that because I've seen your equipment, all the digital equipment in there as far as no overlapping. I mean, I've watched you guys spread that. Tell us about what's in the tractors and how you know to where, what you're putting on where.
So yeah, when I guess started out with the spreading business, I guess we've always kind of had more green equipment than any other color equipment. But one of the fascinating things that John Deere did was John Deere Link, and I was able to get multiple spreaders in the same field. And with John Deere Link, they've kind of updated as they went as well. But now we can have access to have on their monitors. We have 2630 monitors on these machines, and since they've updated as well, but we can see where the other machines have been in the field as they're mapping on their coverage. So that way we're minimizing the overlap and minimizing the waste of double application for a farmer, especially when they get $10 a ton wrapped up into it. If you don't get that product in the right spot of the field, that's a loss to that farmer, and it helps us be more efficient with what we're applying on the field. So on these spreaders, I'm getting all the information back on total consumption on fuel, time, average speeds, and everything recorded on the mapping per machine, and even as applied maps, so that way we can be as efficient as we can with these manure spreaders.
I'm assuming you work with agronomists or with some people that are able to do the grid samplings. And then once you have that field grid sampled, then you can plug that into your machine, and then it'll apply the manure where needed.
Yep, so there's kind of quite a few different ways that we kind of handle those situations. So say if a farmer wants to go to the extent of making a prescription from a grid sample, we can put some parameters on the rate going through those grid zones and plug it into the prescription. And as we're driving through the field, the machine will speed up, slow down the floor to get those tons. If you're wanting a 5-ton area or a 25 or 35 ton per acre in this spot, it'll adjust as that operator is driving through the field. And then other times, even if they have just zone spots they want hit, we can map those out and just hit those areas, because on those monitors it'll tell you what part of that field you're in for being able to spread those zone areas as well.
How does the weather affect the ability to spread?
So obviously moisture would be one of the downsides with having big equipment out in the field. A lot of farmers don't want to have compaction, so we obviously wait until fields are dry or we're able to go, and that's where a lot of the flotation helps out for spreading that, I guess, pounds per square inch with where the places that we are driving. But we start getting into some of these lighter rate applications or compost, and what we're having now in Nebraska is a lot of high wind days, and that'll affect us too. We'll shut down just so that way the product isn't blowing from that farmer's field over to his neighbor's field, especially when he gets a bunch of money wrapped up into a compost or a chicken litter product that's coming from a long ways away.
So I know we touched on it a little bit earlier, but there's a huge cost savings. It may not look like it right up front, but over a 4 or 5 year period, especially if they're on a rotation. We had talked about maybe doing 25% of the farm one year and then just doing that over a 4-year period. You're going to see a big cost savings versus conventional fertilizer over a 5 to 10 year period.
Yeah, so the kind of the best approach that I've with a lot of the farmers I'm working with is I try to tell them, don't try to spread your whole farm or get manure on your whole farm in the first year and break the bank with your operation. But if you look at doing, say, 25% of your farm with your rotation and, say, over a 4-year period, you cover your whole farm, you could eliminate the cost of having to put out any dry product, utilize the manure, just supplement with nitrogen or any other micronutrients that you might need. And what that does is then that puts your cost per year for the whole farm back in that associated. I mean, you're going to be saving money, but at least you covered the whole farm, not in 1 year, but broke it up.
Mm-hmm.
But the best example that I could probably give is on a farm that I did, ended up spreading, it'd be about 180 acres, and total operation cost was just a little over $20,000. But at that time, fertilizer costs were about half of what they are now. And I figured that I had saved myself or kept money in my pocket over this next 7-year period at that time was just a little over $100,000 for what the manure was testing and where we're at. And so half the life of that product being out there, fertilizer has doubled. So what that tells me is I've saved myself even more money by doing the manure on that farm at that time in today's prices on the fertilizer. And even going with the manure, there's, I guess we'll call it more icing on the cake on those manure samples. I stopped at just 5 nutrients. There's, some manganese, some magnesium, boron, copper, iron, and even start talking about the pH of a lot of these products. When you start getting your fields, say in the 5 or 6s, a lot of these products are a neutral product and kind of act as a lime in itself for bringing up your pH and bringing more of a neutral balance to your field and freeing up nutrients. So I had to pick and choose at what point to stop and have it so the farmers didn't have a glazed look when I was putting numbers to it. And that's why I just stopped at those 5 nutrients. So that way they could grasp what we're looking at. And I'd say 99% of the time, just looking at those nutrients, it's a no-brainer, good deal to do the manure without having to go deeper and adding more to it to see if it's a better option than commercial fertilizer.
Well, and I think with today's costs, of commercial fertilizer, I mean, they have to look at that. They've got to look at saving some money somewhere. And with today's prices as well, you want to be growing the best crops that you can, but it also costs a lot of money to do that.
Absolutely, and that is what we're seeing right now. I guess with all these confinement facilities that are in Nebraska, but we've also got a drought that's been going on since about October of 2021, and there really hasn't been much measurable moisture since then. So there hasn't been much manure produced in a lot of these facilities. So your supply is low and demand is very high because of everything that's happened in the world economy, and fertilizer costs have almost tripled since 2021. So it's a lot of weird numbers that we're looking at right now compared to what we were looking at a year ago.
Sure. I heard you say something earlier, and you said something about testing the manure. So not all manure is the same.
Yep, there's definitely some good quality manure and there's not so good quality manure, but I would say all manure has a place. And the better testing manure obviously more money could be thrown into it for the handling and the logistics. And you start looking at what some other companies are doing. Obviously, there's going to be some feedlots too that are going to want to capture some of that value versus the alternative. So there's going to be facilities that are wanting to sell it, and there's also going to be companies that are going to want to broker it. And that's why I always say take the numbers back to that ratio. And if you start getting close to that 1-to-1, then you start looking at, well, maybe the manure isn't the best option for me, or you start asking the questions, why is it 1-to-1? And usually you can start finding out that either somebody's overcharging or they're wanting to charge too much, or there's a third party involved trying to make money off of the manure as well. So that's why you start putting the ratios to it, and it just helps you make it if it's a good decision or not.
I see. Anything else? I mean, you guys are always going 100 miles an hour. There's probably things out there that you're looking at. Things are changing. Anything else that we need to visit about?
I'd say just from the start when this has gone, it's just kind of exploded. There's obviously more animals in Nebraska and more manure, more fertilizer, and the more that we can recycle and use and not have to have money going out to other sources or overseas for fertilizer, that's more money that could be kept in the microeconomies and I guess in Nebraska as well, or Kansas and local areas as well. But it's just huge what manure is turned into. It's not really looked at as an expense for a lot of these facilities, but it's an asset that's on the balance sheet. And it seems like a lot of farmers have had a great awakening that a lot of these other products that are out there, let's go back to what our grandfathers have always said and go back after the manure, because it is the best product that a farmer can get on his field, and it is, from what I've seen, the best return on investment a farmer can do.
Well, and it's kind of funny how I don't know how long ago, it hasn't been all that long ago, that feedlots would pay you to get rid of the manure.
Yeah, so just go back 3 years ago, and we had real wet years. Corn was just north of $3, $4 a bushel. Fertilizer was cheap, and it's all supply and demand, I guess is the best way of putting it, with the manure programs that a lot of places have. So at that time, the supply was high, the demand was low, and the year was wet. So there was all sorts of manure. No one could get rid of it. A lot of these facilities have NPDES permits that only let them have stockpiled manure in certain areas and for only a certain amount of time on a lot of these locations too. So a lot of these places were under the gun to get rid of it. So some facilities were actually paying farmers or subsidizing the trucking to get that manure off their facility so they could make room to clean their pens and have good clean pens for their livestock that they had out there. So, and then you look at it today, it's complete 180 again, and now you got farmers paying feedlots to get their product, and just a few years ago it was the feedlots paying the farmers to take it.
Yeah. Lastly, tell us a little bit about your background. I mean, you grew up, where you went to school?
So I grew up in Eustis, Nebraska. I guess went to college at University of Nebraska at Lincoln, went through mechanized systems management. I guess had agronomy, business, and economics, I guess, degrees or minors with going through there. And since then, I went and worked for a crop consultant in the went to work for Cargill first, down the Arapahoe, Holdridge area, and then even North Kansas. Was working there as a farm marketer for crop input side for a little while, and then went to actually work for Dustin O'Hanlon in Lexington as a crop consulting manager. And I guess that's where I kind of really got to first getting my mind wrapped around kind of what a lot of these farmers and their different farming practices, and started stumbling across samples on fields and seeing what the grid samples and soil samples and how fertile a lot of these fields were. And I guess kind of had a little bit of the opportunity, or the light was starting to go off, but then had an outside company approach me and wanted to hire me to start marketing manure. And I actually started doing that for a company, and I guess you could say I had a conflict with my own moral code with what I was doing, and wanted it. I kind of I quit and I distanced myself because I believe that the farmer should have the best option for what he's doing instead of having these products being sold for as much money that they could be, because there needs to be a relationship between the farmer and the feedlot to make that work from year to year, where the farmer's paying for it or the feedlot's paying for it. And the other business model, it wasn't going to work from year to year because you're taking advantage of the farmer, and then you weren't getting the product move, and it was hurting the feedlot on the other years when it was inversed. So I guess that's where I stepped aside and didn't want to go down that avenue anymore, and really focused on Plum Creek Applications and doing the service to the farmer and the feedlot and making it work for both of them so that way they can both move forward from year to year as a repeat business aspect with it.
Sure. So tell us about your family. I know the Williams family goes back a long ways.
Great family. Love my family. My two biggest heroes would be, I guess, my grandpa Russ and my father Brad. I guess my grandpa was a worker. He's kind of the one that got the farm started and where we're at today. And my dad, Brad, is the one that kind of persevered through some of the toughest things that I've ever seen a person go through to keep a farm going and with what he's doing. So I guess you take that track record with what we got on our farm, and I was able to witness a lot of that and be able to be where I'm at today and the moral code and compass that I've got for working with people and seeing what they're doing. And love my family. A lot goes out to, I guess, with Lisa, my brother Darren, and my sister Ansley, and my younger brother Bladen, keeping everything going there. And then I've even started a family of my own. Married Morgan Williams, originally Cobbs, but definitely inherited the whole family because her whole family moved to Eustis after we started having kids. So helped the population of Eustis grow a little bit in the process. So.
Sure. Well, and I've been fortunate enough, being in business as long as we have. We did business with your grandparents, and of course your dad and aunts and uncles, and it's a great family. And you've really done a lot for the Eustis community. You're doing a lot for the farmers, utilizing the tools or the things that we have available to us, and which is the manure part of it. I mean, like I said, your grandparents used it. Why can't we still use it? And it's just a different way of applying it and using it differently now.
Yep, I couldn't have said it better with it. It's amazing how things have changed and the focus with what utilizing these products that are here instead of looking at it as an expense or just dumping it whatever's convenient, but trying to actually use it to offset a cost for an operation is really how a lot of these, say, farm and cow-calf operations or even feedlots and farmers need to be looking at it.
Sure.
It is a way to save money or a way to help have an asset on the balance sheet from a feedlot perspective too. So
give us your phone number so how people can contact you.
Yeah, so my phone number is 308-325-6524, and I guess we also have a Facebook page that I have my wife kind of manage for me, and people can communicate through us there, but it'd be Plum Creek Applications, LLC, and you can follow us on Facebook. Most times we just kind of have some pictures of stuff we broke, but we try to have a lot of good pictures too, and I guess even going back to, I think 2015 or 16, I think you had your drone and
yeah, we were doing
videos.
some pictures up at a feedlot, and it made me a little nervous because the cattle in the feedlot really didn't like the drone, and so we didn't really want to have a mess. But no, appreciate your time. Thanks for coming down, and we look forward to doing more of these and watching you grow.
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity and having me here.
All righty, take care.